The second is to call roll.
President.
Present.
Mr. Conlon.
Present.
Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Dominguez. Ms. Grimes.
Present.
Ms. Harris. Mr. Henry.
Here.
Ms. Janney.
Here.
Ms. Jones McLeod. Ms. McGee.
Here.
Ms. McQueen.
Present.
Dr. Morrison. Ms. Parker.
Here.
Ms. Sakayama.
Here.
Ms. Schreiber.
Here.
Ms. Shotwell. Ms. Starks, Dr. Starks Turner. Ms. Stevens. Ms. Wilson Miller. Ms. Williams.
Here.
We also have Jacob Cruz. And we also have Ms. Brianna Burton.
Yes.
Like motion to approve minutes from October 12th, second. Call roll, please. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Oh, sorry, we were doing public comments.
No public comments.
We're moving to our first discussion item, which is the focus group questions that Lisa sent out to everyone.
So last week Friday, along with you, I sent out a survey regarding the focus group questions that you see on the screen and share on Zoom for me. And these are a list of questions that Ms. Harris wanted the committee to use to go to different to which several of our student groups to ask these questions about the climate and environment within the school. Unfortunately, I only had 5 people to complete the survey, and to those who did, thank you so much for acknowledging my hard work and doing the survey. I truly appreciate that. So since only a small number of you guys, I decided if we can do it this way. I reprinted out the questions and also have it on the screen. If you wouldn't mind looking through the questions, and I'd like to go around the room to ask 2 things. Out of the 14 questions listed, what is the most important to you? What is the least important to you? And why? I give you guys a small amount of time to go over the questions. And then I say about 2 papers, we just go around the room, and I will start in alphabetical order, just to tell us. And for those who completed the survey, if you would like, I can actually go to the survey and pull the questions that you choose and the comments, and if you want to elaborate more or talk more on what you selected. And also a couple of you guys said some extra questions that I could also be out with their permission. I did you choose.
Yeah, you read that.
No.
Do you have extra? What are any extra questions? No.
just let you know you guys know. Are we ready? Or we need more time? Okay, so again, I'm going to run out a bit of a word. If you wouldn't mind, when you pick the question on your most important in this one, could you give me the number of the question as well? Because when I do take a tally. And once I get the tally and get all the feedback, I will send out a summary of what we discussed today. Please give it to Friday because I have to be ready for another board meeting tomorrow. Just a little time to get out the summary, but if you can give me the number of the questions, so I can tell you.
At least you want the top 5.
Just the most important and the least important, just those two. In the survey, I asked for the top 5 of those, and I would just do the most important and the least important.
You want to wire this, number? Or explaining it?
So after you give me the most important and least important, I would like an explanation on how you did these two.
Gotcha.
Are you ready? First victim. I have to have one.
That was off for you.
I was very insulated.
I think my most important question, is number one, how do you define fairness in schooling? And why is because I think that is in order for a student to really understand what we're asking in the rest of the questions, they need to have it would be important to kind of gauge what their understanding or what their definition is of fairness and inclusion. Because sometimes fair is not equal, so we need to know where they are in their headspace. So for me, I think I would want to start out with that question first. And my least important would probably be number 13, what association or assumption, if any, are made by peers. And I just said that was the least important because I think it can be combined with number 2.
Thank you. Dr. Chandler.
I copied off of Dr. Applewood. And I wish I had done the survey because these are great questions, but similarly, yes, I think it's very important to define these terms because that's going to set the context for all the answers to follow. And yeah, 12 and 13, I wasn't sure what the numbers was, so I thought that's the question. So, thank you.
Mr. Conlon.
I would say number 3 is my most important, and I'll try the bad when I get 13. I think a lot of these can be combined with 13. Combined with 12. I'm still not sure who the assumptions are. Community, teachers. So 3 most important with 13.
Mr. Dance.
For me, I think number 4 is important. I think that as students feel welcomed and included here, whether that be in the classroom or in spaces with other students, with teachers, or whomever, that we will begin to see a shift in the culture and climate. And it's important for me to also be 13.
Ms. Grimes, thank you for opening this survey now.
Oh, don't do that.
This morning.
But you didn't know it's not hard work, so I think you
did. I have changed, even before they spoke, I changed to, I've had number 1 as my second choice, so I'm gonna make it my first choice, defining fairness and inclusion. I have, what do you like most about OPRF? Because I thought it was a large umbrella one, but I'm not quite sure that gets at, exactly what we're trying to talk about in terms of ultimate inclusion. So I think I agree with people that and another one about connections, that they can be put together. One thing I want to add is I think number 14, is there anything else you'd like to add or share, should always be part of a question thing like this in each group. So that should be, that should just automatically be.
So number 1 and number 13. Your resource on 13?
13.
Mr. Henry.
I also picked number 4. Mainly because if you don't feel welcome to anything, it's very self-affect learning, your interaction with peers and out of school, that affects learning, impacts other things and metrics of students, so on and so forth. So least important I thought was 12. That just was kind of general. And by saying it's too broad for a question for me. Broad for students and get well. But I have covered so 4 things shapes question number 11. So that's why I had a tie, but really 4, but then going to 11.
Thank you. Ms. Janney?
I'm going to take the complete opposite role. I think to understand where you want to go, you have to understand where you are. So I'd say 12 is really very important, but I would maybe change students to the, like, what assumptions are made about the community of the students, that their own personal feelings, kind of gauge where we're at. And then the least important for me would be overall kind of place, but I would say maybe 2, because fairness and inclusion, I think that is number 1. You would have that answer. It's like if it's important, it's going to come out through how they would define fairness.
Ms. Lee, again, thank you for completing my survey now.
Of course. I'm going to speak very frankly here. I didn't care for any of these questions. I believe that a lot of these questions felt a little divorced from reality and would lead to far too theoretical conversations when we need to be digging into the weeds with students. So I suppose if I had to choose one, I suppose number 3, a positive connection with an adult. Maybe because that will dig into what is it that is holding, let's say, 80% of our students on the path to making positive choices. Because I think if we dig under the layers, it probably is participation in the student activity or forming some strong connections or bonds with some adults. Something is keeping, I would say 80 to 90% of our students from participating in, destructive choices. And then I would say the least important is number 1. Again, that's a very theoretical question. And if we're going to spend the time and effort to connect with student groups, then we need to have some reality attached to these questions. So
I added a number of suggestions in the Google form because I always do my homework. And
Understood the assignment.
I do understand the assignment. And so one of the questions that I proposed, and I think Lisa also has the others, to what extent are you aware of the expectations for your behavior in the hallways or common areas? To what extent do you feel that the hallways and common areas are safe, welcoming, and orderly? So I want us to get more specific. I do not feel that it is a good use of the committee's time to have teenagers defining fairness and inclusion on this very theoretical level. So I apologize if that is a little bit of a spicy comment, but I just have to speak honestly. Thank you.
So this would be actually list 6 additional questions. I'm not sure if you want to go through or just put them in the summary when I say them.
You could list them because I don't remember.
Okay, so if you guys will give me permission, the 6 questions that Ms. McKee wanted to add was number 1. To what extent do you know the expectations for your behavior in the classrooms and throughout the learning, which is what she just described? The second one, would you describe your average classroom as safe, orderly, welcoming, and predictable? Why or why not? Number 3, would you describe the common spaces, lunchrooms, and hallways as safe, orderly, welcoming, and predictable? Why or why not? Number 4, on average, what kinds of comments do you hear from your peers within common spaces, lunchrooms, and hallways? Number 5, are comments typically friendly, playful, and or constructive? Are comments typically potentially harmful, rude, or problematic? And I just said those were my favorites. Number 5. And number 6, on average, would you say that you and your peers respond in a positive manner to redirections from adults in the building? So these questions will be listed and something that you will receive on Friday. Ms. McQueen?
I just agree with what I just heard. I would add a tally to her question, so it shows it tally. And just feedback on the questions that I had. I just felt the same way. This is not how we talk to kids, and you know, when you ask someone to define fairness and inclusion, something that's like saying define why you should eat food. You know, it's just something that should be. But I did have a least favorite question still, and that was, is there anything else you'd like to add or share? Anytime I pose that to students, they don't. They're, you know, they're still needing the guidance and giving a direct answer. Otherwise, they're like, everything was great. You know, you're not really getting to the root of the answer that you're wanting out of the question that you're asking. And that one was the most big. Anything else you want to add?
Ms. Parker?
I'm gonna echo the comments that as I was reading them, and I've seen them before as well. I didn't know, like, when I put myself back to my teenage self, if I would have known how to answer them in the way that they're written. But I get the idea and the flavor behind the why. So digging a little deeper in a language that they commonly interact with would be a little bit more helpful. But to that vein, I thought, and at first I had a tie between 3 and 4, but I'm gonna go with 4. Because when it asks you, how have you felt welcome, it's asking for an experience. And so I think it's important to I can recount an experience for you and tell you, I really liked when this happened and when I felt like just with my school, and then how I may not have felt welcome. Like I can give you an experience, and I think that's important. My least favorite actually was number 10. And the reason for that is that I don't know that we should ever ask one person to give the answer for all students. So that one says, in what ways do you think OPRF is fair and inclusive for all students? I don't think any one individual at the school can speak to the experience of every single student at the school. And I definitely don't want students of different racial groups to have to feel like I'm answering for everybody of my race at the school. So If that was just asking for them as a person, their personal self, that'd be better, but I don't wanna have questions that ask for all.
Ms. Safayama, thank you for completing my survey.
I really connected with what you just said, and that's why I picked number 4 as well, that students can speak to an experience that they have had, and it felt very concrete. And I also think there's the opportunity for a lot of the other questions then to be rolled up into that. Like you might talk about an adult, you might talk about a peer interaction, and I really thought that kids, or young people would be able to answer that question with something that they have experienced and that could be very fruitful. And then I picked number 2 for what Ms. McGee said. It just felt, a very valuable question at the right place and time, but not when, it just felt very theoretical for the opportunity that we would have to get feedback from kids. And then I also felt a little bit of a disconnect with a lot of the questions, and I suggested some modifications, which you don't have to read that. I just felt like there were ways that even if you tweaked it, it might be a better question. And the last thing that is just a clarifying question for me that we, don't have to answer right now, but I find myself when we talk about meeting with the students in the focus groups wondering how are we connecting with the kids who are not involved in extracurriculars and clubs, and those are probably the most, potentially, I guess, the most vulnerable kids in the building. And so how are we getting their feedback? And is there a mechanism?
Do you want me to read your
No.
information? Okay. Ms. Crider, again, thank you for completing the survey. Yes, I'm acknowledging all those who completed. Acknowledging my hard work. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is so much of what I do at work. My paid job, so I love doing this stuff. A lot of what I've heard, I think people have been really thoughtful. I agree with a lot of what you said. So I think we need to think about kind of what information do we want from young people and why. And forgive me if that's already been discussed and decided, and I wasn't here, but I wasn't 100% sure. And that, before I get to the questions, there are a few things that just stick out as kind of overarching comments that I want to be sure to make. One is that when we do student focus groups about culture and climate, we always have students involved in this part of the process. So helping us to develop the questions, the ways that they're written, the words that we're using, because we do use very different words, right? And it's a great experience for them as well. And we always learn to ask things that we would not have otherwise known. And then my second overarching comment is exactly what you just said, which is how are we reaching young people who are not involved in one of the 3 million clubs at OPRF? I think it's really, really important to get a broad and diverse group of students to respond to these questions and be a part of this. And there are so many students who are not involved in these things, or they go to one club one time. So I think when we think about how big and diverse the student body is in all sorts of ways, if we can pull from as much as possible from all of that, we're going to get the information that we can use, right, that can inform action. I agree with the fairness and inclusion thing. It is one of the ones that I chose as important, but I think it's 2 different questions. I think fairness and inclusion are very different concepts. But I'm hearing what people have said. I think it's true that if we have a short amount of time and limited resources, that we could probably get to that in some other way. So I am going very hard to choose. I know from research that when young people have an authentic connection with an adult and can talk authentically about things very important to them, it is wildly good for their their behavioral, social, emotional health, and therefore academics. So I really like 7. Although I would change it to ask more of sort of an open-ended, describe an experience, right? So describe an adult you have this kind of relationship with. You know, what is it about that person? What is it about your interactions? That enables you to connect positively with that person. I think that could teach us a lot. I just can't have fun. I think it's nobody's talked about 11, so I'll just mention that. Okay, good. I think that for every student in this district to be able to see themselves in some, book, video, worksheet, whatever it is, would go miles and miles to help people feel included because they can see themselves, right? If you can see yourself in your teacher, fantastic. If you can't, then how else can you see yourself in that class? So that is really important. I'm just gonna jump on the 12 and 13 bandwagon, I guess, for the sort of least impactful.
Thank you. And you also had additional statement that you already said,
Did I
so.
say that?
Yes, you almost verbatim.
That's probably because I did it anyway.
One of our student reps, Ms. Shotwell.
I feel like, well, it was hard to choose just one for like most important, but I really like number 9 a lot just because me being a student, when I am connected with a teacher, it makes my learning experience way better and more understanding and more happy to like get to that class because me and that teacher have that bond. And I just feel like it's important for all students to create that bond with her to be talked about of how it could be like spread throughout the whole school and to have my input heard about like how the things are going to function. I feel like that makes me feel heard and welcome into the school as well. So yeah. And then I also like 11 a lot as well because see, like when you hear like about yourself or things that relate to you and what you're learning, it just makes it more of a reality thing, you know, like it makes you more aware of things that are going on or like, you know, what you learn in general. There wasn't one that I didn't really like though. No, I can't think like that.
You don't have one that's important to feel so this is something that you would like to be asked and you have to pick on something.
Yeah, I don't do that. But I do like 12 and 13 though. A lot of people are like, I kind of like it though. I do like it.
Thank you, Ms. Shotwell. And last, well, not last but not least, but the last person I would like to thank for doing my studies and skills. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So I'm really excited because I have resonance with you, Michelle, on my favorite question, which is number 9. And I was getting nervous just because, you know, this whole thing is, you know, to hear our cancer. Thank you. Okay, so you can hear me?
You heard the number 9.
Number 9, okay, good. Okay, so what I want to say is that this questionnaire, it's like I tried to put myself into my student, like what was I like as in high school? And it was, I wanted my voice to be heard. So that's why I really connected with this one. I wanted to give my input and my experience. The one word in that question though that I wanted to change, because education, education is what the school is about, but it's also this other aspect, and that's the goal of this institution, this education. But in terms of our community and the issues we're mostly concerned about, it's a certain aspect of our education, which includes the more affective experience of students. So, so it was hard to pick a number one, and the questions about feeling welcome and included seem really important to me, because education, you know, it's a relationship that we're creating here, and that relationship, that's people need to be relaxed to learn. So, and I have also a really hard time picking my favorite one, because I really thought these questions were really cool. And also really liked the conversation that we're having, and really taking people's opinions. Because I think everyone has something that's like good. So it's like, yes, that's really good. And it isn't like an either or, it's together. This is what we're building together, and all these different ideas to make this whole thing better. And I think one of the most important things was what this, to me, was what you said about I can't remember what it was, but some, I don't know, just student voice. That's one thing. It's like, and that's what you said. We need to have, especially in this community, you know, which we're really working towards, is having students come and tell us. So then it was in one what you want.
Oh, she already read.
This is right. The lovely was calling.
Although I am no longer speaking to Raquel McGee because she has completely homework shamed me. I do my initial sentiments in reading these questions align 100% with what Raquel shared. I do think when we're talking to students and we're wanting to get their most real responses, we have to talk to them in a language that they understand. And we have to talk to them about the things that they care about. I don't know that a good percentage of our students, if you say fairness and inclusion to them, are going to respond in a way that's going to solicit the input that we're really looking for. So I think we need to maybe look at some of the terms that we're using to catch them where they are in understanding what it is that we're asking them to share. It was hard to kind of go through and look at some of the questions as a student because I feel like they may be just a little bit outside of what our students are caring about right now. And we're going to miss some opportunities if we don't capture those questions in this opportunity. This may be a one-hit wonder. Right? We might have one chance to get really good feedback, and we want to make sure that we're capturing them in a place where we can fit to that. My least important, don't be angry. My least important, if I have to give a least important, it's going to be number 9. But that's only because I feel like we give students so many opportunities to have a voice, and in so many formats they have a voice. I think that question, I would like it or prefer that question read, in what ways are you engaging with these opportunities to share your voice? And if you're not, why not? Because I think that therein may be something like, maybe I don't feel like you care about my voice. Maybe I don't know that this is the opportunity or this is the time. I think we might need to clarify some of those opportunities because there are a multiplicity of opportunities for students to share their voice and we're always asking for it. So I would venture to say, let's maybe rephrase that or reshape that a little bit. And then the most important for me is number 11. And it's number 11 because I always think about my own childhood experiences in the classroom and not seeing myself inside of a history outside of Martin Luther King. I love him, but Martin is the only person that made a contribution to history. And I need people to see we need representation is important, it matters. It speaks to limitation when you don't see yourself represented. It speaks to heritage and being proud of where you come from. It gives a sense of inclusiveness in a place where you may not feel like you belong in the hallways. But good grief, I have a place. We have a place inside of this classroom in this textbook
that I can identify with and I can be proud of. And I think we owe students those opportunities to be proud of where they've come from. And they should be able to experience that in the classroom, whether their teacher looks like them or not.
Thank you so much. And if I could turn to my last two, who are going to be soon to be new members. Once approval at the next board meeting. Let's start with Ms. Burton.
I would like to start off with, I agree with a lot that was said specifically, Raquel. I think, yeah, we need to start basing a lot of these questions in reality, and especially after the week we are currently having, making sure that students do feel safe in these common spaces, that they do feel like they can rely on the adults in the building to take action or redirect them when needed, and that they respond to that. But in terms of this specifically, I went back and forth. I felt like 4 and 7 were definitely my top two, but felt that 7 could kind of tie into 4. So kind of similar to what Ms. Parker said, you said like it's important to hear those experiences from students on how they feel welcomed in the building, because if you don't feel welcome but feel like you belong here, you're not going to show up in the most positive way or be your best self, I feel, in the building. So I think it's important, and we learn a lot from listening to those experiences and seeing like how could we do better in certain situations, especially with the how have you not felt welcome. I think that would be a big piece. In terms of what my least favorite, I'll hop on the bandwagon. I'd say 12, mostly because it is just a little too broad, I think, for students to really answer. I think it's high into 13.
Mr. Drews.
I think I have to say I really like what Ms. McGee was saying. I think especially when it's given when this is being given to students, they have to be able to relate to it. And I have to say, one, if I, as a student, if I got it, I would kind of roll my eyes a little bit and say, oh, like, are they really going to take anything actionable away from that? I mean, does my definition really matter? And also, I think, so I think that probably would be my favorite one, especially where it's positioned in the order of questions. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of them as being very, I don't know, very not concrete and like your experience kind of. And my favorite one I have to say was number 4, because if you're not feeling welcome at school, you're gonna in turn be defensive and hostile, and you're not gonna be engaging with your peers and your teachers in a productive manner, and then it'll kind of lead to a vicious cycle, I think. And it'll, especially when we're talking about culture and climate, I think that's the one that's the most important. I also really like what Ms. Williams said about number 9. I don't think that one is very much needed, because I mean, these questions are just another example of how OPIA is seeking out student voices. I know that Ms. Parker is there at lunch very often, and it's pretty widely known. So I don't think number 9. And I have to say, not to go against Chicago, but I like number 12, because I think that how students perceive themselves and their perception of community is important. And number 13 as well, how your peers are perceiving you, or just the perception of how your peers are perceiving you is very important. I think those are my big comments. And maybe I like the questions that, like Ms. Parker said, deal with experience, and maybe if there are patterns in the answers that show something, oh, this one thing is being done in classrooms that is having a positive effect, oh, we can tell the teachers, oh, this is working, or something that is not working. But and this may be 6 questions that she had that were really concrete, actionable, and they're just experiences and things that you take action.
Thank you so much for your feedback, and the winner of today's activity is Ms. McGee. All right, so that concludes this portion of the agenda. Mr. Henry?
Next up, I believe we have the presentation from Ms. Quinn.
Oh my God. Oh. I just saw that.
Been ready to go. Okay, I just make a final statement regarding that this activity. What okay, so if you really look, I just think it's so important to recognize how the questions that we as adults did not care for as part of this focus group, the students felt like that was really important to them. So that just we need, that's why it's super important to make sure that their voices are heard in the development of these. But it also brings us back to, we just don't think the way our students, there's a gap. And so what's important to us may not necessarily be what's important to them. So those two, 12 and 13, we have 2 student representatives here, and both of them said, I like these questions. I think that's just important to know.
Agreed, thank you. That is why they're here. And we have other students here, too. So good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Melanie McQueen. I am the co-president of APPLE, which stands for African American Parents for Purposeful Leadership in Education. I have a presentation for you tonight entitled Purposeful. It's a Purposeful Impact Proposal. This came out of our last meeting when we were going through these questions and talking about the infractions that are, plaguing our African American students. And it did not take me long to spit this out because we've been talking about this for years on top of years. I want to thank you guys for this opportunity to do this presentation and also thank my guests for showing up tonight. I have parents in the room, I have students in the room, I have community activists and leaders in the room who are all familiar with the work of APPLE. So thank you all too for showing up tonight. I can put, right, just make sure. They work. Equity for all. On October 12th, the appointed District 200 Board of Education Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee met and discussed the behavioral education plan. We reviewed data on infractions committed by race and gender for school years 2021 and 21 to 22 of what we had. And I do encourage everyone who watches this from YouTube to view that CCB meeting, and then this presentation will make it more sense. Since the pandemic of 2020, student and parent involvement has diminished drastically, especially amongst African American students. APPLE, a parent organization, moved its resource meetings to Zoom in 2021, and we're now offering hybrid where we do both in-person and Zoom meetings. As the community is regaining its comfort with in-person activity again. This proposal offers real, immediate, impactful ways to re-engage our students, parents, and community in a way that is equitable. Definitions in this proposal, which is very important, the definition in this proposal are as follows. All stands for African American students of Oak Park Little Forest High School. Equity is defined as culturally appropriate resources. I'm Melanie McQueen. I'm a community member, and I am a current parent of a junior, Avery Brown. Stand up.
Let's see you, girl. Come here.
As my junior, and also freshman, Autumn Brown. And a past graduate who's now at Harvard, Ambria Jones. I've been a member of CCB since its inception, representing APPLE, and we are the only 501c3 African American parent organization serving Oak Park Little Forest High School for over 30 years. The goal of this proposal is to give financial support for programs and opportunities. Parent volunteers at OPRF-HS committed to reduce the number of infractions by all students
providing equitable outlets for more positive experiences. As a nonprofit, Apple can partner with OPRS for funding. We can bring awareness to common infractions with after-school events. We can encourage usage of outlets for all students. OPRF can recommend families for an Apple dinner. This is where we meet one-on-one with families and find out, we get more input from them on their experience being here in the school. One thing that when you're not engaging with parents, they will tell you, they just like we are asking our students to feel welcome, they don't feel welcome. And with an Apple dinner, we're able to break bread with each other and have real conversations about what's going on, not just with their students, but even at home and what we can do to make this a more welcoming environment. And so the school can refer those families to us and say, hey, we're not having a really good time or having an easy time connecting with this family. Can Apple step in and help? Also, Apple can assist OPRF in finding sponsors for clubs and activities. Our purposeful impact is a 4-pillar approach that includes parents, students, advocates, and measurements. The general framework is in place for equity impact assessment with the goal identified that we can take active steps to close existing racial gaps and mitigate infraction. So I'm on the Apple mission already. Okay. Apple's mission is 4-pillar: parent empowerment, student advocacy, equity, and policy. Apple supports parents in navigating the school system. We advocate on parents' behalf when solving social and academic problems with an emphasis on the best interest for the students. In student advocacy, Apple advocates for students experiencing problems of any kind in Oak Park Green Forest High School, ensuring a fair and equitable process for the resolution. Under equity, Apple is an equity partner with OPRF. We identify discrimination, harm, and barriers that keep all students from an equitable education and opportunity, and we work to eradicate them, ergo being a part of CCB. Policy. We work in tandem with OPRF to provide parents with a voice. So for long-term and short-term policy analyses, process, developments, and implementation of daily activities, culture, climate, and behavior for all students' campus life. Ergo, the racial equity policy. We provided a parent voice when writing that, we're pulling that together. Our purpose, we're dedicated to helping all OPRF students succeed. We're a resource-rich organization. We literally just had Compass speak at our Apple meeting last night. We had the author herself come to talk to our parents about how to get our students into colleges that fit them, and get them up to $75,000 to help them pay for school. We serve as an ombudsman to the students and their families. We ensure barriers to student success are identified and removed. We monitor opportunities and consequences for equity and fairness. As a parent organization for all, it is our responsibility to be a contributing part to a positive high school experience by ensuring purposeful leadership in education. Just to mention a few of our accomplishments, Apple has given 4,500 in scholarships to our graduating seniors, students of color, which boils down to 9 recipients. We've had over 80 resource nights, and we assisted in passing the racial equity policy, and we're also a part of many other task force and groups throughout the 30 years. And most recently, we have become one of the recipients of the OPRF Community Foundation grant for $12,000. Apple's goal and model for this school year is less talk, more action. We're excellent talkers, we're excellent conversationalists, we're excellent with our different ideas and our opinions of our students' experience. But the records show that African American students make up 52% of total infractions. So while we're in here talking, we still have the same problem we've been having for 30 years. Our goal. One is our racial equity policy and assessment measurement. Is it working? I think, again, we have lots of conversation about data, but we have yet to have measured if what we're doing is working. Apple is here to continue to work with District 200 and Board of Education on recommendations to create a welcoming environment where all students experience a sense of belonging and the expectation of excellence. I feel like we always miss saying that there should be an expectation when you walk into these doors of the type of education that you're going to receive and what we know that our students are capable of doing. Where student discipline rates are not predictable by race, socioeconomic factors, or special education status. And in addition, our goal is to eradicate unfair practices within the behavioral education plan. Our second goal, we want to promote Ivy League and HBCU college applications among all students. I have looked over the calendar for this year, and I still feel like it could be more diverse. I feel like a lot of the schools that come here, the students haven't heard of them. And that's why they're not being visited. That's why the tables are not full. But I also feel like there could be more intention on making sure that the students are getting there. For example, when they're meeting with their counselor, how many tables did you go to today? Or that conversation with the parent, hey, we have college hours here, did your child talk to you about it? That sort of interaction and engagement. We are willing to develop the Oak Park Ivy League of African American parents to promote Ivy League education amongst OPRF African American students that are in the achievement gap. Our community is rich with Ivy League graduates that are graduates of color. And I feel like we're missing on an opportunity of tapping into our own community members who can have those conversations with our students about their experience in getting to Ivy League college university. We want to work with OPRF to secure permanent transportation to HBCU college fairs to gain access to on-site college acceptance, mentorship, and scholarship. We want to invite more HBCU college colleges to our school and remove that financial barrier to higher education. I know 1 year, Anthony Clark was able to get a bus and save students, and this exact thing happened. So I'm not talking about anything that's new. I'm saying that this is something that should be permanent and ongoing. We should absolutely have buses ready whenever there's college fairs so the students can get there and remove that barrier of transportation.
Can I share something real quick? I just wanted to share that Mr. Wade and myself, as the BLU co-sponsors, the students actually just attended the HBCU college trips. Where was that?
At Whitney Young.
It was, at Whitney Young, the HBCU college fair. So I'm not claiming that that's like permanent, but we did just take them like 2 years ago.
Awesome. Number 3, we want to increase all student participation in OPRF clubs, activities, and community service. Community service is so important. That's the first way you start to respect the space that you're in. When your parents tell you, don't walk on the grass, ring the doorbell, don't honk your horn when your friends are coming, they come in and they speak. It's the same thing when we're talking about our school community. And so community service again, and we do have a community service club, but we are not promoting the importance of community service with all students. SAGOR 1996 is my reference, states that competence, belonging, usefulness, and optimism describe the difference between children who are positive and social versus those who are withdrawn and negative. All students must find a connection at our high school, and the connections must be equitable, intentional, and impactful. Number 4, our fourth and last goal, increase all parent involvement and engagement. The higher the degree of parental involvement, the higher the impact on the child's academic achievement. That is not anything that you guys don't know. Parental involvement not only enhances academic performance, but it also has a positive influence on the student attitude and behavior. Attitude and behavior. I am very old school and I have a short patience with students with nasty attitude. And when we are intentional about creating those relationships, the attitudes go away because we're letting them know that they matter and we are caring about how they're saying what they're saying. We're jiving with them, we're vibing with them is what they say now. And so that, again, it's so important to have that positive influence on the student when you're interacting with them. And I'll also say it's not just you, but everyone in the school who is subscribing to this should be supported by the old school teachers who aren't subscribing to it. So that's how it becomes a more impactful experience, because you're not just getting it here, and then when you go to another classroom, it's completely cold. A parent's interest and encouragement in a child's education can affect the child's attitude towards school. The classroom, their conduct, their self-esteem, absenteeism, and their motivation. In layman's terms, if the parents like us, they'll say, you going to a good school. So we want to make sure that we're on the parents' side as well. So here is the strategy. I want us to move the needle on this data. Love talking to you, love seeing you, but I want to see the needle move. These are the ways that we can do it. We're going to talk about AXO, Operation Snowball, the HBCU College Fair, scholarship access, the HBCU College Tour, and traveling abroad. In alignment with OPRS Racial Equity Policy and Behavioral Education Plan, and the strategic plan, which we're also a part of both times, we can increase engagement and awareness through campaigns utilizing news scene, trapeze, social media, TV screens, which we just paid for all throughout the first floor, football games during announcements, deans having their conversations with students now that they're our friends, auto dialer, counselors, parents, and with financial support. Put some stuff in the mail. People do still appreciate getting something in the mail. In my research, $9,557,500 is spent on 625 all student education and facilities. The high school's remarkable physical facilities provide cultural and recreational benefits for all students. That's the tagline on our report card. And I said, wow, we provide cultural and recreational benefits for all students? I would love to see it. And I think with $9 million, we should be able to do that. This is a list of the programs and the barrier, what it is, what the program is, and what I feel the solution can be. Does anyone know what AXO is? Awesome, we got one in the room. We should have 2 people in the room who knows what AXO is. AXO is a teen program derived from the NAACP. We had a 30-year teacher that was here. She's now retired, Ms. Lucen. She was our AXO sponsor. We even had winners that would go to nationals participating in AXO. But it's like, you know, I tell everyone, once the matriarch or the patriarch person of the family dies in the Black community, then all of a sudden things start to fall apart. And it feels like when she left, that fell apart. There wasn't anyone else to pick up the ball and make sure that AXO was still moving forward. So we need a sponsor. And there hasn't been any activity since 2012. I will also mention in my research, we do have 83 or 85 clubs and organizations. We used to have over 100. Each year, high school students, this is the description of AXO. Each year, high school students across the country start a journey to sharpen their skills through academic, cultural, technological, and scientific Olympics, and that is AXO. From visual arts and business to performing and culinary arts, participants work with community-based volunteers for a year to develop projects and performances. The experience culminates into a local and national events where students compete for scholarships and other rewards. So again, as we're trying to dig deep and find out what the students are wanting to do, it's all covered here. They rap, they can participate. They sing, they can participate. They write, they can participate. They do spoken word, they can participate and win money for scholarship. Next is Snowball. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what Snowball is?
Told me last week, so.
I know. Operation Snowball, which is also at my high school, I'm a proud Mather Ranger. Operation Snowball is an international youth program that empowers student leaders. They create leadership through prevention education, community advocacy, and leadership development to create positive impact. Operation Snowball began in 1977 in Rockford, Illinois. The name originates from the idea that if I have a positive impact on you, you can have a positive impact on someone else, and the effect snowballs. We used to have hundreds of students participating in Snowball. The last time we had a bus.
To be fair, it was after COVID and everybody wasn't ready to get on the bus. But before COVID, all the way up until we shut down, we've had buses, hundreds, like you said.
Awesome. That's just half of the problem. Attendance is low, but what number of African American students are we encouraging them to be a Snowball? And there is scholarship for it. Do they know that? Are their counselors saying, hey, Snowball's coming up, you got that application? You know, it's again, being intentional to have an impact. If we're gonna talk about it, we gotta be about it. And actively work towards increasing that number. And maybe those kids don't want to go there. Maybe there could be another type of weekend opportunity for them if we're listening to what it is that they want to do. Next program is the HBCU, well, not program, the next is the HBCU college fair. The access barrier. I'm so glad you guys got to go to Whitney Young. My point is that should be something that just always happens. We have money to have a bus waiting on Saturday morning. They should have breakfast, they load the bus, they all go, they come back and do whatever they're gonna do for the day. There should not be a barrier there. OPRF only needs to secure busing to the college fair event. That's my solution. At the time, Dr. Joy Lynn Pruitt-Adams requested a link in addition to the college fair event. Dr. Joy Lynn Pruitt-Adams requested a link for all student scholarships to be added to the student resource page. All we need is a link. Once the students click that link, they get to see all of the scholarships that are available by due date. Right now, you have to go to the Minority Student Network and create an account there. And it's too many steps. They click the link, they go to the application, or they click the link and they go to the website. And again, Apple is more than happy to help develop that list because it's wide and there's so many opportunities that our kids are missing out on. So that's the solution, a link. Next is the HBCU college tour and traveling abroad. I put those two things together because it is basically travel. Everything is not all just about Oak Park and the city of Chicago. We have a world that our children should be exploring, and we have access to that right here in this school. My daughter was able to travel as early as 8th grade. But were there many other students of color that were with her? No. And I'm not understanding why that continues to happen and why we are not intentionally saying, hey, we are gonna have the meeting tonight, they're going to Italy, you should go. And then follow up with them the next day. Did you go to the meeting? Oh, here's the packet. To ensure that our kids are being given these opportunities to go, and then engaging with the parents to help them figure out how they're going to get there. Financial support is needed for professional college tours and more promotion and attention on sending all students to a college tour or travel abroad opportunity. I challenge the high school to increase that number by at least 1% this year. A night dedicated to travel opportunities can still happen for parents. OPRF can assist in connecting the students with funding. We can assist in connecting students with funding. There is funding in our community for students that want to travel abroad. We can assist them with the applications. We can assist them with getting passports. This is another opportunity we don't want to miss out on. And so the solution, tell them, according to the data, we have 625 African American students, this is boys and girls. That would assume that we have 1,250 parents or guardians. Our data on engagement is less than 1% of that. COVID, okay. But we have an opportunity to truly engage and bring them back into the school with a whole new outlook. Parent involvement versus parent engagement. OPRS has opportunity for parent involvement by way of volunteerism. Engagement is limited to all students facing infractions or academic issues. So again, back to our issue of what we talked about at our last meeting, infractions can lead to students not being able to participate in these opportunities at all. And I know for a fact that the students do not understand that if they keep going down the road that they're going to miss out on all of this because none of their friends are doing it and they're not in trouble. Apple has more success with parent engagement. We're listening to the parents, we're listening to their ideas, we're getting from them what they found works best for their child. And doing it. That's how they know that you're listening. And you're taking what they're saying seriously. Post-pandemic, there is an opportunity to re-engage with all families to develop a more genuine partnership that's helpful to young people. A proactive versus reactive approach. We want to be proactive versus reactive. We don't want the true engagement to start when your child is in trouble. We want the true engagement to start when they first come through our doors. That is the end of my presentation. I have offered simple solutions, I feel, a link, conversation, a bus, and true intention so that the next time we're meeting, we can actually say, you know what, we got 10 more kids to go to Snowball. We actually have 3 students, one went to Japan, one went to Italy, one went to Europe. That's what we want. And we want to let you know that Apple has been doing it and we want to continue to do it with you and bring the parents back in an impactful way and in a welcoming way because this is their school too. I want to thank our past leadership and parents for recognizing the need for radical parent involvement. I want to say thank you to our current parents and leadership for continuing to provoke change. And I will also give all of my sources because I would love for you all to go back and say this is right or this is wrong or that you've learned something. Our own page, Apple, www.oprfhsapple.org. Contemporary Issues in Education Research, Volume 10. The Illinois State Board of Education Report Card, the NAACP AXO website itself, which there should have been a packet that was emailed to you guys on that as well. Operation Snowball, Positive Action, our OPRF activities, our behavioral education plan, our culture, climate, and behavior committee own data, our racial equity policy, our school profile for 2021-22, and the Wednesday Journal, where our student was a national winner with AXA. Thank you.
All right, next we have circle time, and just be mindful of the time. We have 10 minutes left, so we have a the rest of the person should take us just fast, take it to 5, or we can do 2 minutes or less to take 15. Sorry, my president, we should worry about time. So if everybody's okay, we can go 2 minutes or less for reflection on this plain statement, and let's be mindful of 2 minutes. Agree?
You guys want to go into the circle? You want to stay?
I think we can stay where we are at the same time because we're already about to have 3 minutes and no one personal time. Yeah, that's, so this will be.
Everybody.
So everybody has a mic in front of them. So I'm going to start. All right. So the question, I just want some reflection on presentation, meaning just how do you think we could do, how we could move forward this and what's not just this very, very brief. So not a lot of time. I wish we had more time to do that, but just how can we maybe one line, how can we move forward this immediately or next semester or so.
I don't know. I don't know that I feel that I'm in a position to be able to respond to that. I think that there's obviously a lot of opportunity that can be taken advantage of, and
you do reflection, not the how. Reflection.
I'm gonna leave it at that.
Right.
Yeah.
Ms. Parker, Ms. Parker.
First of all, thank you so much, because what we did gather to do last time was to give suggestions on how to move this work. And I do think it's important that we move the work. People know me in the schools, I'm always like, let's do it, let's go. What I have learned though, is that it's never as easy as it seems. And that the students we're dealing with today are definitely exposed to different things than we were in the past, in terms of the access that they have to different things, and therefore which drive their interest. And so I'm just curious to knowing how our current students, like what their contribution to this, because I need to know that bringing things back is something they want to see, or else we will bring it back and they won't get it, they won't engage. I'm also interested in how Ms. McGee and Mr. Wade advertise to get the students for the college tour. I know that Mr. Hobson leads the college tour as well. One of the things that Ms. Carla Williams mentioned was that we are always asking students, what do you want developed? What do you want to see? What's interesting to you? So that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs that they have. And I want to make sure that as we partner with the parents and that they're feeding into their children, that we're hearing that back as well within our schools, so that we are meeting the need that is had and not the need we think they should have. And throughout every developmental year that they have, because when they started freshmen, you know, what's that student getting? And then when they develop, go into the sophomore year, what are we doing specifically with that student? And how are we building this and scaffolding it so that by the time they're seniors, they are launching to where they need to go? But it has to start when they first get in the door. So I appreciate the ideas and definitely want to talk more about like putting it forward and making it happen, making things happen.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. My initial thoughts, while you were presenting, I just want to put in, so we met yesterday for a little bit, and we had a side conversation. So yeah, what stood out the most is, are our counselors and student services department, are they really having these super intentional conversations with our minority students and letting them know of these opportunities that are in the building? I am an alum of here. I graduated in 2015. I can say that I was making them aware of a lot of the opportunities that I know were provided back then as they are still provided now. So that's a very important piece in just providing more like access to our students. So that was just something that really stood out to me in their presentation. But what Ms. Parker said, just making sure that if we bring back these opportunities that students are actually going to engage, because that is a big piece, or it's a waste if we bring it back and they don't take opportunities.
I really enjoyed the presentation as well. I liked how it was relatively, I guess, simple, actionable steps that can be taken. And while maybe some of them do serve more students who are already maybe were more ambitious or were already going to be seeking out these opportunities, maybe you still probably would help a couple of students who wouldn't have the opportunity otherwise if you took these steps. And even though it may not fix all the problems that we have at the school, it'll still help one, or if it helps one kid, it's still doing something. So I think it's good stuff.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to echo the sentiments of Principal Parker and making sure that we are offering students the things that students actually want, not the things that we think they want. While I do agree with like HBCUs and visiting those spaces, we probably also need to look at like visiting the trade spaces and things like that, because some of our students are simply just not interested in pursuing college on any level, but they may be more interested in pursuing trade and things like that. So we want to capture all students, especially our minority students, then we need to look at every opportunity. And that's not to say that we don't have high expectations for them, because we can have a high expectation for them to be a great electrician, a great barber, or any of those things. And we do provide in those programs here at the school. I just want to make sure that we are encapsulating everything that would be of interest to all students.
I echo the sentiments of what you said prior to, and just from the experience of having a teenager who is not really interested in a lot of things. That's just sometimes the nature of teenagers. It's very hard to figure out what it is that they're interested in on a year by year and a case by case basis, because they change all the time. Generations change all the time. I also agree that that was one of the questions that I posed, was what about other post-secondary options? Even though I'm heavily educated, so are many of my family, that was not something that my son was interested in right away. And for him, it was, I want to travel. So the Navy was the option for him. And so are we also letting students know that there are other options, and he does want to go to college. He just wasn't interested right now because he had a very traumatic experience during the pandemic. We have to understand that some of our kids are like that now. And so though we have adjusted to things opening back up, they really haven't yet, because they've lost a lot of their social connections. They've lost a lot of just who they were in terms of being in school and having that school experience. And so we have to also be cognizant of that, being compassionate about that, and just understanding who is in front of us as well, because we sometimes act on our feelings, but again, we don't act on what, because me, and though I would love for my son to go to college, I recognize that that was just not something that he was ready for. And so when we bring a lot of these activities back, a lot of these things back that we want kids to have, understanding that they just may not be ready for that type of social interaction on that level right now, and asking them, you know, is this something that you're really willing and ready to do at this juncture? And if not, what is, and how do we grant you or ease you back into these types of activities or things?
Good evening. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I was a counselor for 14 years before I came to Park as a dean, and so I always lead with the counseling lens. And for me, immersion into experiences for students don't know. 16 and 17-year-olds don't know what they want to be for the rest of their life. They just don't. Adults' career change all the time. So a lot of who they recognize themselves to be comes as a result of the experiences that we give them. And so I do feel very strongly that those experiences should be spearheaded from our counseling department. I think it's great that DLU took students, but I think that could be a collaboration. But I think overarching it should come as a very intentional part of the planning through the counseling department. I also think that we need to be really cognizant that we do not have one portrait of an African American student in this building. We're not all the same. We have very different needs. And if the goal is to meet the needs of all, then we have to recognize who is included in that all. And we have to have a plan for them all, and we have to have an expectation for them all. Discipline numbers are not going to shift if we don't bring to the table the reason that kids are doing this. Like if we're not addressing that, the needle is not going to move. So if the deficit that's bringing you to, I'm the dean, I'm just, you know how you want to see a second meeting with me, I'm just gonna give it to you. If what your deficit is not being serviced and it doesn't impact your behavior, I'm gonna hold you accountable. Because accountability is what oftentimes shifts students' behavior. If we cannot acknowledge that something is happening before you get to me and we work on that piece, you're gonna keep getting to me. And I have to respond to that. So if we're gonna focus some energy somewhere, I'm moving that needle, let's focus that energy there. What is happening to our students of color that's getting them to my office? Because that's where there's opportunity. There's no opportunity with it. I can go restorative a billion times, but it's the behavior that gets you there that we have to. So let's work on that.
Oh, good job.
I would just like to say I agree, and I think following in on opportunity and engagement and exposure. And I think, is community service mandatory at all?
Not here.
It should be. And I just feel like for each grade level or as a requirement for graduation, it should be a baseline thing for everybody. And then secondly, I don't know, my son's a sophomore, so I don't know how big the career day is here, but I think any exposure to a variety of different careers, be it trade, be it professional, be it culinary, any time that anyone can see what they potentially could be and have an opportunity to experience and engage with someone outside of the faculty in a real life, whatever, I'm just trying to be a chef or whatever, I'm a food scientist, so like, it's, if they could see, oh, this is, I really love food, and I want to do something else, to actually have a much larger and expanded career day, I think would be amazing, and then maybe lean into that, the accent. Because I think that would be a natural progression. Because then you could get volunteers that would come in with a career day and hear about that and be like, I totally would sponsor someone. So it was great.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for sending it out in advance too. That was really helpful being able to read that and process that. And I met with the snowball leader because I was a little concerned about numbers going down. And she shared with me data from the last 8 years 9 years, maybe, that was 7 consistent years, the numbers were literally like 15, 16 students apart based on the years. And then 2021, last year, COVID hit, and the numbers went way down. The good news is they have 19 leaders this year, which the sponsor believes, and they typically had that number, it's usually about 6 to 7 per leader. That, so she's expecting numbers back in the 130s or so. They're visiting every English class, every freshman English class this year to expose freshmen. They talked about news scene. I mentioned social media as a potential to try to recruit it. And then I've been hesitant on whether I say this or not because I never really want this known. But for years, I've like purposely recruited students of mine who aren't involved, not just in Snowball, but go to homecoming. Freshmen, doesn't seem like you kind of have a fit yet at the school, go to homecoming, join this club. I walk students to clubs, and often I just pay for their participation in this, and that's what I'm embarrassed about saying. Like the kids know I'll do that, but I'm not doing this for attention ever. But I'm not the only teacher doing that, and I do think it's important for myself to, especially with Snowball, to look. You know, I've always tried to find the student who's not involved in anything, to look at it racially, to make sure I'm using a racial lens. And I do that. And then finally, as far as Axel goes, I adore that and miss her, and the school's last without her. As a member of the stipend committee, we have like certain like levels that like first it's almost always students bringing it back. But we also have like certain like levels of participation and must meet. The one exception we make is if we feel it represents a group that is underrepresented for whatever reason. Then we often take the set number of students or set number of meetings, and we make some adjustments on that to get it going. To get it started with the hope that it builds over time. So thank you for the presentation. A lot of really wonderful ideas here, and it could really benefit our building.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm pretty action oriented myself, so I appreciate the actionable steps. And you've actually challenged me to think about my role in certain student activities that I'm co-sponsoring and how I can be more intentional about recruiting more students to participate in those activities. In terms of parent involvement, another thing I've been reflecting on is the fact that I do not feel that many Black parents see the Black professionals inside of this building as part of their village. And so I've been thinking about how we can build up that trust so that there's that existing relationship there, so they feel like I'm sending you into a building where you have all of your, temporary or virtual aunties and uncles, and where we can build up that trust to where students feel that. So maybe they're less likely to engage in destructive behaviors because, hey, that's like my virtual auntie, or that's a very much a part of Black cultural heritage, forming those actually non-related, that cousin who is not a cousin. So that's something that I've been thinking about how to strategize in that way. So thank you.
Thank you, that was really good. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions that I'll maybe shoot to you later, but a few things that kind of stuck out to me. Early on in the presentation, you said unfair practices in the BET.
DEP.
BEP, yeah. It says BET. That is something we talked about last time, and you all, we talked about that afterwards. I really want to know more about that, and I think that we can take actions on it, and I do think it is about getting to the root causes. What is really going on way before you get involved. And what can we do to step in at that point? So that's of interest to me. Could OPRF have an HBCU event here?
We do. Apple has what's called Aim High Night, where we bring in HBCU graduates right here in our community, right here in our school. Ivy League colleges and universities and the Divine Nine, which is our fraternities and sororities, and they bring scholarship opportunity 2-hour night. It's an amazing time, and it's for our students to know that it's not just one thing that they have access to. They have a whole smorgasbord of things that they can do and try for the first time.
And I love the idea of expanding whatever is already going on to include trades, having a, you know, I love that there's that there are barber courses and all sorts of other things at the school that should really be highlighted. If you need a link for access to information about scholarships, I feel like that's low hanging fruit. Let's get that link, right? And then I wrote down service requirement. I was gonna ask also if community service or service is a graduation requirement here. And apparently isn't, but I think that it absolutely should be. I think that providing service is, it's social, it can be social. It hits on all the SEL stuff, depending on what you're doing with the service. It could be academic or scientific or whatever. And it is, you are giving and thinking about somebody other than yourself. And that is incredibly powerful work, and everyone should have to do it. So I would love to work on that, whatever that looks like. So thank you.
Return to say thank you. And also I really like your focus on action. And since I'm not a member of the school administration, to be empowered to take action and contribute. And I'm not sure how all these things play even a link. But just saying, oh yeah, we need to do that. Like, who decides, you know, how that gets implemented or how that happens? Just those basic questions are floating around in my mind. How do we move from the talk to the action? And who's just, you know, who you have to, someone has to take responsibility and get assigned. And there needs to be a decision about these are the things that you're going to aim to do this year. So I don't know how any of that happens. And I don't really need to, but somebody needs to.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Apple, for being here and present since the beginning of this, so I appreciate that. Even before that, just kind of, I guess, 2 things. One, you know, I do think, I agree that there is definitely still room to get root cause. I think most of the child's experience happens in the classroom. And so we have to kind of start from there and move on through it. Plus one to this notion of hosting something, or maybe expanding the HBCU event that's here. I went to FAM, let me know how FAM can be present for that. Got another one?
Want to go?
No, it's the whole time.
She wants to go.
Yeah. All right, so I mean, I love the idea of hosting maybe even bigger events here. And highlighting the groups that you highlighted. And then I guess maybe the bigger idea, but still something I think the district could think about leading is this notion of like a parent university. It's a tremendous gift to have parent advocacy with the force and the sustainability that you all have, but it still feels like an us versus them conversation. So I would love to see a way that we can kind of integrate. I don't know if these are the right 5 things, but I do know that there's an opportunity to have a more integrated approach to what we can do for all students. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Melanie. I was glad to hear about AXO. My children were here during days when AXO existed. It was a wonderful thing to highlight excellence. I also, in my time in CPS, I worked for PASA, which is vocational school. And yes, all students aren't wanting to go to college, but we're walking on a path to what their passion is. And so if there's some more trade connections that we have here, that would be a wonderful thing. In CPS, we had a service requirement for graduation, it was back in the day. And what came to my mind is my entry into the desire for social work happened in a service kind of activity as a teenager. It was experiential. I experienced what it was like to give to others. I saw myself in it, but it had just been talked about and I hadn't been in it. I don't think it would have a powerful impact on my career decision that it did as a sophomore in high school. And then the role of counselors in actively seeking, recruiting, telling, taking, students to do these things is very impactful. So I reiterate all that is.
Thank you for your presentation. I love that you're advocating for students that look like me and making sure that we get all the opportunities that we can. And to point out, I did not know you get a scholarship on going to Snowball because I definitely went. But I also want to tag along with what Ms. Rainer said about how all African American students are not the same, and we also need to make sure that we're not just throwing one type of African American stereotype and making it to a whole general thing. So I really love that. And to talk about the scholarships and stuff for African American students and how not everybody wants to go to college. I understand that just because my friends talk about it all the time. So I know my friend, she doesn't want to go to college. She wants to like real estate and stuff. So I just feel like it's very important to make sure that we tell students all their other options and not always of course encourage college, but also make sure that they have other outlets that they can go to and make sure that, make sure everybody get heard and everybody get a scholarship money. A nice life.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. And I want to thank you for your presentation. And I'm just going to conclude with what I've heard a little bit about the pieces. They're not monolithic, which is true. And so I'm going to give a quick story about my nephew who graduated here. But he actually graduated pre-COVID to school. He's not a kid that can actually do well remote. He started remote college, dropped out, went downhill. And but the funny thing is, we're all educated too. My brothers, my parents were going to college, came to Jamaica, so going to college came for a reason, right? So that was the agenda. However, he actually went in the military, didn't tell anybody. And because you think you can talk about it, because everyone thinks you know that we're college. Fast forward now he's in the Air Force, because what we found, I found when he started staying with me for several months, is he had a thing for the Navy. So he was seasick, yes, they can't go to the Navy. So in the Air Force, and now he's in IT. And it was education for me because I saw these other opportunities in the military. I didn't know it existed. When I was in college, they come to high school, flash one, here's our Force 4, now I'm not doing that, right? But if I would have known the possibility of generating wealth, going to the military, if you can do that. He already has his 30 credit hours. He's doing a security plus. Typically, he's going to get stationed over now in January. And he's going to see the world, right? And I think what we have to stop stigmatizing the military, especially in our communities, because there was a time where it was very biased and it was put us in front lines and on its way. But it's more than that, right? You can become a doctor, a nurse, IT specialist, general, whatever it is, and you can see those options for our children. It's possible. If you're friends with my real estate, you get a GI Bill. If you're staying on the base, you still accruing money, you can buy a property. So I think we can expose kids to that more. It's an option. And going back to trades, if you got to support me, I'm always talking about trades. I'm always pushing on administration. They're doing very good in there. But outside of barber and culinary and CNA, I'm looking at MEP, which is mechanical, which is HVAC, electrical plumbing. right? Because carpentry is well, but those three things, there's actually labor shortage right now, so I've been rehab projects, and there's a problem finding actual people who labor, because student, if you knew what you could make doing these trades, you could say, hey, I can see myself doing this as well, so I will throw it out there. That's how we can add to, I think, what we're talking about for these kids, because if my nephew and his friends saw, hey, military is more than just us in Call of Duty, and I can't afford to go to college, and I don't think about it, they'll pay for it, and I think so we can actually start looking at it holistically for all our students. So, thanks for everybody for joining us tonight. We want to go over, I'll try to keep it 8:15, but sorry, 8:40, whatever, but you know, great conversation, great dialogue, and I move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So move.